Hi, my name is Eddie Weitzberg. I'm a professor in anesthesiology and intensive care at the Karolinska Institutet and Karolinska Hospital in Stockholm, Sweden. I would like to tell you a little bit about the story of exhaled NO and how it started, and I want you to know some of the details and the steps of kind of the history of exhaled NO. So you might say that the 80s was a great decade when it came to vascular science and discovering nitric oxide and other substances in the vasculature. And you can say that the 90s was a crucial decade when it came to the discoveries of exhaled NO. So the first one started the field of NO, and the second one, the second decade, the 90s, started the exhaled NO field, which is now up to, I look today, it's more than 5,000 publications on just exhaled NO on PubMed. So it's quite an expanded field. So in the 80s, nitric oxide was discovered as a signaling molecule in the vasculature, and it was generated in the vascular inner wall, the endothelium, and it dilated blood vessels. And since we were interested at Karolinska in Stockholm in the vasculature, and we were also interested in regulation of vasodilation in the lung, but also in the whole body, we started getting interested in these findings in the late 80s. And we were actually two groups working in parallel, but with no collaboration, which was kind of odd because we were interested in very similar stuff. But it was the group of Lars Gustafsson at Karolinska, and it was the group where I belonged, which was headed by Jan Lundberg, and the pulmonary research was headed by Kjell Alving. So in 1991, Lars Gustafsson's group could show for the first time that there was exhaled NO in coming out. There was NO in exhaled air coming out from animals and humans, and it could be blocked with an NO synthase inhibitor. So it was an enzyme generating nitric oxide in the lungs, which came out in exhaled breath. And when we saw that publication, we were very interested, and we happened to have a chemiluminescence machine, so we started, of course, trying to build a good system, which in hindsight was very rudimental. But still, we could measure exhaled NO. And by chance, some of us who exhaled in that machine had allergic asthma, and we could see directly that in those subjects, exhaled NO was greatly increased. So we realized that this could be a non-invasive, rapid, not harmful in any way, test if you had airway inflammation. So we, apart from just studying this more, we filed a patent with a focus on using this in asthma care. And Lars, we didn't know that then, had filed a patent some years earlier on exhaled NO in general as a to detect something in the lungs. He wasn't focused on asthma at that time. I could say also the year after, 1994, our collaborator Jon Lundberg, not Jan Lundberg, who was the head of the group, but Jon Lundberg had a nice article showing that if you measure nasal nitric oxide, which we discovered actually earlier that it's high amounts in the nasal, in the upper airway, there was an absence or extremely low levels in patients with primary ciliary dyskinesia. And that was a very interesting finding, and it's actually used even today as a diagnostic tool to help set the diagnosis. Anyway, we had those patents, but not very much happened because any investor or anyone who wanted to go for this as a clinical method were scared to invest since we had two patents and we were not collaborating. So I was part of trying to negotiate together with Lars Gustafsson's group to try to get us to work together, and that was very fun actually in hindsight. It was animated but not very fun fun discussions. And finally we could agree, and then it was quite easy to get funding from investors to try to start a company to develop a method and a machine to measure this and try to establish this as a clinical method. And so we started Aerocrine. We called it Aerocrine because it means excreted in air. I mean, the NO from the airways is excreted into the lung airways and comes out in the air. We thought it was a top name. The investors didn't, but we were pretty stern that it should be named that, and it continued to be named that for many years. Anyway, so the company was started in 1997, and actually the year after, in 1998, the discovery of NO in the cardiovascular system was awarded the Nobel Prize in medicine or physiology. So it was a very good time. We were very boosted by this Nobel Prize award, and it was a lot of buzz around NO, which was perfect when we tried to develop this method with exhaled NO. So it was a very good year. And yes, just the year after, in 1999, exhaled NO was discussed and as a clinical method, and how to do it, how to measure. So the American Thoracic Society came with their first recommendation on how to use exhaled NO, how to measure it, how to use it in the clinic, and so on. What does it say? How do you interpret the values? And that was a very nice conference. I and Kjell and Jon, we were there. And as you know, many of you, there have been several recommendations afterwards, several of them as late as last year from different organizations around the world, promoting that you should use exhaled NO as a tool to help the doctor to not so much set the diagnosis, but more to monitoring the care of the patient. So that was a short version of the history of how we discovered nitric oxide, and we are very proud actually that it came from two groups, both in Stockholm, Sweden. So we kind of feel that it's kind of a Swedish invention and a Swedish idea that brought this to the patients. So with that, I would like to say bye, and hope this was interesting for you. Bye-bye.